Okay, thanks.
Round two.
Yeah.
Hi guys, welcome to round two of motion. I invite the Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Is it recording already?
It's streaming.
She's like,
Ladies and gentlemen, opening government believes that every citizen, albeit representatives or citizen voters, have the right to access democracy. Because at the point at which you can't access democracy, this is when you cease to matter in that democracy, ladies and gentlemen. We will argue from opening government that the ability to have private donations, especially when they are unequal in the distribution that they have, distorts the democracy and extends the power of the oligarchy and limits the ability for other individuals to be able to access democracy in a more meaningful way, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be talking about three things. The first of which is why we need an equal public distribution to the sort of donations that we have. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the right to express, as well as how we lead to a more meaningful and comprehensive framework of democracy. Lastly, I'm going to be talking about political capture and why we think that's generally a problematic position to take in status quo. But before that, several points of policy just for a matter of clarification. Number one, we think that you can still have donations that individuals can contribute, but this directly goes to the state and the state can allocate it to the party in equal contribution. Secondly, we will argue that we will distribute this allocation per hit and not per party, and we acknowledge the fact that some parties may have more candidates than others, but we think that this will benefit individuals, especially in a position where you have a 1 versus 1 election. Thirdly, we think that the ability for you to have donation depends on the country's like GDP. I think this is something that we shouldn't be like talking about. Lastly, we will also on opening government ban things like super PACs, ladies and gentlemen. We are okay with things like the ability for you to walk the grounds and have volunteers, but the ability for you to individually participate in politics or not be dependent on your advantage in financial liquidity as well as donations, ladies and gentlemen. So the stance on opening government is that which system is more likely to correct the sort of imbalances that exist within a democracy. We think that government will achieve this, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, why do we need equal public donation? Here's the thing about political campaigns and elections. We think that oftentimes the framework of democracy belies the fact that not everyone gets the access to the democracy in a more equal manner as well as a comprehensive manner. Oftentimes, individual parties as well as like slightly lesser known or smaller parties are often held back by the inability for them to be financially strong against more established parties that have things like reputation as well as financial backing that comes from the fact that they have been established for a very long time. We think that the cumulative position of having representative as well as party support is an extremely important notion in a democracy. Oftentimes, it is detrimental to smaller parties in their ability to engage in a political framework, ladies and gentlemen. We agree that in some instances, smaller parties may be able to break the democratic framework and achieve some sort of recognition, but it often takes a very long time because it's either not visible to the citizens who are voting for you in an election, or they don't trust you, or they have no ability to relate to you because there is no ability for you to build a brand that is dependent upon your financial ability and your financial liquidity, ladies and gentlemen. This is problematic because at the point in which you are talking about an election, the ability for you to want to fight with the larger party has to be on a consistent and equal manner to ensure that there's some degree of ability for you to reach voters on a larger scale. This means that your financial ability for you to reach voters in rural areas, for example, or traveling across states, or having equal representation in the media is an important notion to assure that you have some ability to gain a reputation, ladies and gentlemen. Because we think at the point in which an election is over and you have an unequal representation that exists within things like Parliament and Congress, oftentimes the sort of discussion that exists is controlled by the select few and is not representative of all individuals who are participating within that democratic framework. You see this happening even in the most developed states like the United States, where you have the discussion controlled by the Democratic and the Republicans, whereas the independent candidates oftentimes don't have a say in that discussion because they were unable to fight the sort of financial backing that more established parties have, ladies and gentlemen. We think that this is a lot worse, especially given that the sort of discussion has to ensure that every single voice within the democracy is heard, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that an advantage needs to be reliant on things like the financial backing that you have. Moreover, we think that there is an ability for you to evaluate whether or not your advantage should be dependent upon your merit as well as your policies, as well as what positions you take, ladies and gentlemen. So what does an equal access do? We think that it gives a fairer fight, especially when it comes to election, especially when you're talking about one-on-one election where individuals are fighting against one another. It gives more political mobility for individual candidates to want to reach voters in the most widespread of notion, ladies and gentlemen. What an unequal distribution does right now, ladies and gentlemen, is that it only suits and empowers those who are already established with the status quo and ensure that the democratic framework is stagnant and solidifies within that particular power, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, we don't think that the right of voters to express themselves is an absolute notion and relies on your financial ability, because in status quo, we already limit your ability to express politically via things like political cap in the nation, as well as limiting your ability to express speech in a particular way, ladies and gentlemen. We think at this particular juncture, we should not prioritize the right to express of these individuals and should not be at the expense of the health of the democracy, ladies and gentlemen. Secondly, how do we envision a more comprehensive political framework under our side of the house at the point in which you are able to access? I'll take this.
According to the motion, the collective pool of these election funds will come from an election budget. Can you perhaps illustrate to us who will be determining what this election budget is and what's the size of this election budget?
We'll be very happy to have a body that is representative of all individuals. It does not have to be the ruling government that is determining the sort of funding that we have in the status quo to ensure that every single voice is heard, ladies and gentlemen. We don't think that this is like a big issue in this debate. Secondly, we think that under our side of the house, we better ensure access to things like state functions, ladies and gentlemen, because the ability for people to want to join an election as well as the democratic framework that exists in status quo is far more likely to happen at the point in which they have some financial liquidity and some point of financial access, ladies and gentlemen. And we think that this is a lot better, especially when individuals who are representing in constituencies have to have the ability to access the framework to ensure that they can back up the voters' needs on the ground, ladies and gentlemen. We think that the ability for you to have unequal private donation means that oftentimes the perception is skewed towards whoever has the most clout and whoever has the most financial backing. Like, for example, in the US presidential elections, we will argue that Bernie Sanders has the support on the ground, but because Hillary Clinton has the media controlled by her because she has more financial backing and financial ability, means that oftentimes the perception is skewed to show that maybe she is the far better candidate and not comparative on the merit that she has, ladies and gentlemen. Lastly, we will argue that political donations, especially those that are unequal, oftentimes make individuals vulnerable to political capture, ladies and gentlemen. Because when you are dependent upon political donations, especially from organizations and large groups, oftentimes you are forced to act in the way in which they expect you to do. If you are a politician that receives money from things like the NRA, you are supposed to vote in a particular way. When it comes to things like gun legislation, ladies and gentlemen, oftentimes you are held at ransom and not wholly representative of your constituency. At the end of the day, we think that government in this debate allows for a more comprehensive democratic framework that ensures individuals have the ability to access, and we think that the right to express yourself ought not sacrifice the health of your democracy. I've never been proud of it.
Yes.
No, don't say that. I'll get thrown in jail.
Here, here.
Madam Chair, let's first understand what exactly is the importance of money that's used in politics that we have today, right? Generally, what is understood is that the more campaign that you have, it almost equals to the more votes that you can have, the more votes that a party can have, and because of this, these parties can reach out to people in rural areas. That's the most common thing that we can understand. What we are going to address today is that we're going to address the inequality that the inequality that is addressed to these state funds that is being used. We understand that state giving money is to distribute the funds to among parties, but we feel that because they equally allocate these funds, it will result in the inequality that you have among between dominating parties as well as minority parties that we have today. We're going to address two things in our speech, Madam Chair. Firstly, we're going to talk about whether equal allocation will fix the imbalances of the political system that we have today. The second thing we'll tell you is that what happens when those funds or when state becomes the determinant of how much funds will they give to these political parties that we have in the country. But firstly, here's the sense. We want groups to have private donations because of a few reasons, right? But let's understand what do we defend. Number one, we are very happy to have a check and balance system on political financing of these parties. Whether the donors are things like whether who their donors are or how much these parties receive from this very donors. No, thank you, Jay. The second thing we'll defend is that we are very happy. We're also very happy to have cap on political financing. Things like we restrict how much can an individual give, how much can an individual contribute to parties. Right. Number three, we don't agree with Citizens United because we feel that there should be a cap on how much an individual can contribute. So because of this, we feel like private donations are very much fine under our case today. But firstly, let's see what Jay has talked to you about, right? Firstly, we don't agree that the first speech or the first part of the speech, we don't agree with that because of number one. Why? Because we feel like the system that you have, the system of equal allocation that you have, will eventually perpetuate the imbalance of political system. I'll further clarify this in my argument. The second thing I talked about, firstly, we agree that small groups might need more money than majority groups that you have. But number two, why they should argue that it will create an incentive for dominating political parties to hold power for them to determine the amount of money that they want to insert in the pool of funds. We feel that this is extremely harmful for several reasons. But for that, firstly, we also talked in her idea of ensuring access. We feel that cannot happen on the their side because of a few reasons. Number one, you cannot propose when you have an independent body to use states funds because of a few reasons. Number one, because states funds are parliamentary concerns, Madam Chair. This can create a council that representatives can determine how much money that they want to distribute. In order for them to determine how much money can a party get, that is always up to the dominating parties because they are at power at that particular moment. That's why Hannakiri, the second half of Jay's speech, what she told to you about people being captured by donations or political lobbies, we feel that wouldn't amount to an equal funding that they want to have in the very first place. Before argument, yes, Jay.
In a framework in which there is an established coalition that has a large majority, what's the guarantee that every smaller party can incentivize organizations to view them as politically viable to give private donations to begin with?
Look, firstly, you have to understand that equal funding does not necessarily mean that it will be an equitable funding for these parties, right? Giving the same amount of money to different parties in your country to a party with powers and more capabilities than a small party, we will not fix the situation of the imbalances of system that we'll have at the end of the day. What's going to happen is that you perpetuate the inequality that you're going to have, the inequality that would eventually happen at the end of the day. The same amount of money that you give does not equal to fairness political system that you want to have. My first argument is this. I'm going to tell you why system of equal allocation will perpetuate the imbalance of political system. Here's our premise. We think that smaller minorities parties survive by few reasons, right? Number one, because they can attract private sector to help them, right? Because they can also beat campaigns of the other side. Things like the monetary things that they don't get, that they don't have in power, things like influencers, or also networking with other parties or also companies, right? Number two is because minority groups, minority parties are likely to get money from private donation because they have legitimate concerns, Madam Chair. They are more often than not, they are oppressed minority, and this is easy for them to market their concerns through independent bodies like NGOs, for example, or the media, where they can channel their concerns and actually get a legitimate vote from the people. The third analysis that we have is that it will be a system that blocks out private donation. We feel like there will be no shift in power imbalances when you have equal allocation of resources, because that same amount of money, Madam Chair, you can always cancel out each other, right? Because the majority will still win because of the power and also the influences that they have currently at a particular time. What is essential for them to understand is that for these minorities, the ability for you to get money is because you have the ability for them to get money is because they have nothing else in power, right? They don't have influences, they have no connection at all. The concessions that we have today is that number one, we can see that could be the worst case, that minority groups don't get much money. However, on our side, we'll tell you that if you are able to market well, if you are able to tell to the public well, you can voice out your concerns, at least they can have more money and overcome the majority that you have in the country. On the government side, you will never be able to get the money from the other side because there's always because of the equal education. Number two, why a system that bans private donations and equally allocate will create a perverse incentive to reduce the overall pool of funds. Our premise is this. It is because to determine the pool of funds allocated in the election budget, right? We have to argue that how much, like before you determine how much money you have to, you want to put in the pool of funds, they are always subjected to political interest management. This now will create a majority to reduce the funds in elections because now they donate money as much as minority groups need. Why? Because they can maintain their power and influences because of other factors, things like their name itself that can attract people who are less informed about their parties, right? The conclusion that we have today is that overall, harmful political culture where now politicians as well as parties no longer compete to get a vote. What they do now is that they don't do this whole, they won't have a healthy democratic competition because they will always choke the small groups out from the competition. It was also harmful when harmful political parties culture for votes, things like you are now racing to the bottom of politics where you can always suffocate your competition out. Thank you.
May I begin, Madam Chair? Madam Chair, I think I've roughly got 4 extensions. 1, a comparison of which model better improves the broken system. Number 2, why the political imbalance they talk about on their side is an unfair burden, how we improve the system. Number 3, I'm going to delve deeper into the right to express political opinions and why that needs to balance against the state's imperatives. And number 4, if I have time, I'll talk about political apathy. Now, first argument, they're on the model. And over here, the quibble from opening up is that our model is going to be prone to regulatory capture. How do we decide if the state can disperse funds equally? Well, under both sides, there's something called an independent electoral commission, the one that draws the boundaries, the one that appoints the judges, etc. Usually made up of the judiciary, ex-politicians, and constantly in the media spotlight, governed with very strict charters of operation. So we think that if you want to shit on our model, that applies to both sides because you presumably also have the commission on your hand. We argue further in rebuttal to Hannah's argument on how the state will decide how funds are allocated, is that even if the state does so, there's some very strict rules as how it can allocate per head. Like Bantuan Rakyat One Malaysia has very strict rules on how it allocates funds to the less fortunate. So we also do think there are already checks and balances in your system to make sure that even if the state has to allocate money, it can do so in a transparent manner, which is reviewed constantly every year by the Judicial Committee. The second argument she raises under this is that there will be a perverse incentive to reduce the pool of funds available to individuals. Therefore, reducing the budget that is spent in campaigns. One, this is probably a good thing. Number two, we think that this reduction of funds hurts bigger parties proportionally more because they are the ones who spend a lot on the media machine, the super PACs, and all these things. So even if we do agree that there will be a reduced funding in the elections overall, she never proved why that's on face a bad thing. And number two, we think this hurts established parties a lot more because the smaller parties are now able to campaign through things like social media, which are low cost and easily scalable, therefore improving the process. Because what we and Jay are saying is that at least there's some degree of easing the ground parity versus their strange alternative we should never keep there about, where they say presumably we want private donations and no solution to inequity, no solution to minority parties whatsoever. They've taken a very high burden. I hope Mitsal can do something to resolve that. Second extension, they're on redressing the political imbalance and why that's a poor burden. Because what they argue is this, that big parties and small parties will never ever be the same, and somehow our burden is to solve that. Number one, that's a bad burden. Our argument is merely to get your foot in the door because currently the sheer weight of per capita funding difference means that these people cannot even get to debate on stage in front. They cannot even get equal airtime on national television. Our funding gives you that equal airtime, the equal debate, the equal social media budget, but beyond that, you still have to roll up your socks. Like I told Hannah, you still have to market yourself. So what we do is get you in the door, but the rest of it, if we are fighting against a big party, well, sucks to be you, but at least we give you some degree of awareness. Yes.
Let's say Anwar has 1 billion personally and Najib has 2.6 billion personally, and they both get equal distribution from the state. How is this fair, like to Anwar Ibrahim, when like he can't combat and get like representation from the...
Sir, I understand what you're saying, but given the situation in politics in this context, we would say that Anwar probably prefer our system because it's fairer to him than the other system. Just saying, okay, nothing perfect, but we try. So we actually argue in the comparative, they are not trying to solve these minor parties. The other argument they advanced in Hannah's speech that minority parties will get private donations and now that will be quashed out. I'm not sure what world she's living in, but in reality, the bigger parties often get the bulk of private donations. We acknowledge that minority parties may get certain actual donations from overseas, and we're happy to bite the cost that we want to remove that source of funding versus the bulk of funding that's coming into the pockets of the big parties from McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, and whatever funding investment bank in the Cayman Islands. We argue that minority parties often have a lot more scalable ways to access, like social media, like campaigning, like crowdfunding, which if they have to turn to these instead to raise money, is overall a better mechanism because this is direct from people on the ground rather than the other one. So we think that's okay. The third argument I'm going to delve into is the right to express political opinions and why that should be balanced against a larger right. So the argument here, and this is so interesting that we can get the concession from their end, that Citizens United and caps of political donations are good things. So even when she does support private donations, there's already a halfway mark. Consent is not absolute. We're going to go on to this further and analyze why this is such an important thing. Here's the reason. It is because your right to vote or express your opinion cannot make sense only in a vacuum. The vote, after all, don't come screaming out of your mother's uterus saying, I have a right to vote. The vote is only given meaning in the political context which allows you to vote and express your opinion. And that's the point we want to uphold the health of democracy and that system that mediates as an interlocutor between other people's right to vote. We think it's perfectly reasonable for us to limit your ability to express your opinions by throwing money down the system. Because just as you have a right to express your opinion in as loud a voice or in as money the voice as you wish, other people also have a right to hear other political opinions. We think that we're not banning you from voting for any party you want. We're just limiting your ability to throw money behind that voice because there's a distortionary effect on the way issues are framed, on the kind of airtime you get. Which is to say, the overall discourse in society now becomes over who shouts the loudest rather than the quality of ideas per se. So we think that in the interest of better quality debates and ideas and fairer representation of the political spectrum, we are very happy to ban your private donations and allow equal access. Last extension, oh my god, I have time. They're on political equity. Sorry, Misa. So the idea is this. One big problem with this system is that people just don't want to vote. And even if you make it compulsory, they vote carelessly. So how then do we ensure that the rakyat comes out and votes properly with intent? Here's the thing. When you pass a policy that means that people now know it is equal funding and that their crowd-funded support, their walking the ground means more, this is when they say, my country means something, my vote means something, I can come forward. So at the point where you get a silent majority to think, versus their situation which offers no solution whatsoever, that I can make a change, this is a very powerful symbol that the government is returning to by the people, for the people. This is where you hear more voices in the system because now they're convinced their marginal vote means something more. Their little campaigning means something more. Their advocacy means something more. And why is this important? This goes into what Hannah said, because the people who are the most directly affected by this effect are minorities. When before Citizens United and they made their bad decision in the USA, when people turn up in droves of Barack Obama, they're predominant Latinos and blacks. So we do see a powerful effect. The average choices, the very minority she wants to help a lot more, and you impose limits on the white man, upper middle class, Jewish capitalistic system that will otherwise oppress us all because of money, interest, and establishment. What we are for inside opening government is a system that may not be perfect, but at least we are doing something to combat the rash of private money that's influx of the system. Even if we give each individual amount of money, which may not be enough to destroy the Republican Party overnight, at least we started somewhere, because the best of us was always once a beginner. We are very proud to propose.
Here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the reason why Hannah didn't spend time delving and responding to every single one of the concerns that the Prime Minister brought up, because we didn't have much concern with the Prime Minister talked about. We do agree that the right to speech was affected, right? We do agree to some level, ladies and gentlemen, that individuals should have control over the private donations that they have. But, ladies and gentlemen, all the benefits of the government in this particular debate is premised upon the presumption that the money that will be dispersed equally, and we concede that it will be equal, ladies and gentlemen, will be a significant amount of money in order to correct those imbalances. Notice that Hannah's speech, contrary to Lucas's misrepresentation, wasn't about the system of electoral commissions being corrupt and therefore finding some way to not distribute the money unequally. What we told you is that sure, the election commission would distribute it equally, but the pool of state funds, ladies and gentlemen, that will be given to the election commission in the first place will be politicized, and the total pool and amount will be reduced at the end of the day. No corruption, no manipulation, just pure politicization, because they can't tell us an independent commission will determine how much state funds will be given to the election commission, because state funds are fundamentally a budgetary concern that are determined by the state legislature or parliamentary matters to begin with, ladies and gentlemen. So to determine the inherent election budget to begin with, you still need to go through the political process of parliament or the state legislature under that side house. That's why Hannah's argument was so important in this particular debate. Her second argument was about a race to the bottom when it comes to election time. That more established parties would rather have less money in the pool in total, because those are the parties that don't need the money as much. Lucas lied to you when they told you that bigger parties need the money and are hit more by them. Because these are the parties that already have an established machinery of PR, already have industry relations, already have people in power that they can network with. So they don't need the political donations as much, ladies and gentlemen. That means it was a lie for Lucas who told you that they will be the hit hardest by this particular policy. When it becomes a race to the bottom and they force the total pool to be minimal, choke people out, ladies and gentlemen, and they can operate on a minimal amount of total pool, which will be equally distributed at the end of the day. The people that will fundamentally harm are the people that actually need more money than the bare minimum that will be provided under the side of government. That was the nuance that Hannah brought to you that wasn't engaged with by the Deputy Prime Minister in this particular debate. The reason, ladies and gentlemen, we weren't willing to get into the rights quibble that Jay and Lucas want to talk about is that we were willing to defend Citizens United. We don't think that's a principal contradiction to say that it's a fettered right, but private donations are still important because it hands the right in order for people to get private donations and look to people for help, ladies and gentlemen. Lucas acceded to this particular importance when he told you crowdfunding is exceptionally important for smaller groups because it allows people to participate in that particular political process. But under that policy, crowdfunding and people participating doesn't happen, ladies and gentlemen, because you ban private donations on that side of the house. That means fundamentally you are beholden by these state institutions that are fundamentally controlled by the political interests on that side of the house. That's why we think on a first level, the total pool of funds is a definitive determinant of whether or not you can survive in this political climate. The second thing, ladies and gentlemen, is that we think it's quite dubious at best under that side of the house whether you can get people involved or not. But before I go on to whether or not I'm going to deal with apathy and things like that, yes.
We already conceded that the amount may decrease in the political donations that you have, but your position is that smaller parties can market themselves well to get political donations. How do they market themselves in a way that incentivizes political donation to even come in to begin with?
Okay, so that's the second area. How do you become politically viable? Because I think Hannah already hinted at this when he told you that when you have legitimate concerns, especially since Lucas also acceded that there are many ways that smaller parties can circumvent existing power structures in order to get their message out there. But there are some things, ladies and gentlemen, that smaller groups are able to do when it comes to getting more funding that larger groups aren't able to. They told us that existing power structures get more political donations. But ladies and gentlemen, corporate interests are varied as well. You have some groups that are corporate oil interests, and then you have some groups that are massive environmental interests as well. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gives billions of dollars to environmental startups as well as environmental lobby groups. Mark Zuckerberg gives also billions of dollars in that particular donation as well. We think Tesla, as if you're talking about minority concerns in that particular regard, we think it's a lot more likely that under our side of the house, NGOs and private sector interests are more likely to take concern when it comes to these particular minority groups if they can actually get their money's worth in that particular concern. We think that NGOs, humanitarian NGOs or minority concerned NGOs are less likely to take up the mantle to defend these particular rights or even donate or take concern of this particular issue at the point at which they are told that in order to help that minority group, I have to fund the other side as well in this particular scenario. If I want to fund a anti-capitalist, anti-bank kind of policy, I have to also give money and half my money to go towards the exact side that I don't agree with under that side of the house. We think it disincentivizes people or private sector groups from ever engaging in the political process and taking up the mantle of defending certain minority groups that don't get represented under that side of the house. So if your issue is political apathy, ladies and gentlemen, at the very least, we concede that the worst case scenario, perhaps individuals that are minority groups have some trouble in order to attract some donorship under our side of the house. But there are two intractable problems that government cannot solve in this particular debate. The first intractable problem is that a smaller group will always need more money than just equal in this particular debate in order to beat out the infrastructure that's already been built by the machinery of a dominant structure under that side of the house. But secondly, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it is very important for you to maintain private interest in these particular minority concerns, because if you don't have private ownership, if you don't have private entrepreneurship, ladies and gentlemen, in this particular circumstance, then you only disincentivize people who actually care about these minority interest groups from actually helping in this particular scenario. In this particular circumstance, ladies and gentlemen, equal does not mean correcting imbalances. Equal can sometimes also mean perpetuating those imbalances. Thank you. This is our team thing. We'll look at each other. So much extra time. The toilet. Oh, you're speaking member.
So like extension.
Extension.
Literally extension.
No. Definitely member.
Wait, you're on live stream, bro. Live stream.
So much limitation we can say.
Yeah, it's round.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think one of the biggest problems of opposition side so far is that despite the fact that they can see that there's an established machinery in which governments can monopolize and control, they still think that it's much better to cater to disparity by keeping it that way. I don't see exactly how that's going to happen. Because necessarily, even if the entire argument is that things like private entrepreneurship are what bring opposition down, that still doesn't dismiss the fact that because of the established machinery, governments and established parties can still make more money, ensuring that the disparity continues, right? That's why in my speech, I talk about two major aspects of debate that I think is still being left out. Firstly, why private political donations skew the discussion of issues within these democracies, because they don't think this debate stops at elections, or what happens after those elections as well. Secondly, I'm also going to talk about the barriers of entries that will necessarily that exist inside the school, and why, for example, these people perpetuate it, right? But before I move on to these two questions, I think an immediate rebuttal that needs to happen. Firstly, a lot of the things that Mayor spent a significant part of his first speech talking about the politicization of the particular machineries that distribute these funds at the end of the day. Firstly, we think that right now there's already politicization of many institutions by established parties in order to skew votes towards their particular side. For example, things like gerrymandering, things the fact that they have huge influences over the particular media. The fact is, they can do this without any cost to themselves, right, as an established party. But at least right now, even if our institution is politicized, whenever the established party wants to reduce the budget, they'll think twice about it because they know they will also affect their survivability of the party because of the fact that they need those political donations. It's a matter of comparative, right? Their side also has that idea of governments establishing their own machineries and skewing things so that it's politicization. But at least on our side, whenever they decide to politicize, it comes at their own cost. Secondly, they said, look, but these people don't need that money in the first place. That's why they won't be affected. First of all, I think that's bollocks, right? Established parties need money as well, and as much money as possible within their current context, because they also need to fund these monies towards, for example, candidates that aren't as popular and need extra campaigning in order to ensure that all these things are that they are able to evolve in a demographic that starts to become more and more pro-opposition at the end of the day. So I don't think the governments are going to be willy-nilly and say, let's reduce the budget anyway, we don't need that money, right? But the comparative is under your side. They have less of an incentive to think about these things twice, because they reduce it anyway, because you know, they can, even if, let's say, they reduce budgets for political gerrymandering, none of that comes at a cost of recruiting youth members to their parties, none of that comes at a cost of funding candidates that are less popular under a particular demographic. So comparatively, even if we concede to politicization, at least our politicization is much more accountable and much more inclusive, because it comes at the cost of the people trying to politicize the system. Sit down. Secondly, they said, look, but we feel that as if we feel that private entrepreneurship is important in order for you, in order for opposition parties in order to claim more grounds, and you disincentivize them to ban private political donations. Firstly, we think that even that people would still be able to feel empathy towards a particular institution because of the fact that they care about the rights in which they want to fight for. For example, people won't just stop caring about the minority rights and environment simply because now they have to fund a particular state in order to distribute these particular resources, right? We feel that, at least now under our side, what happens is that whenever they give this particular money, it doesn't give this, it doesn't influence or benefit a certain party disproportionately under our side, and distributed much more equally at the end of the day. People will still have the incentive to come in. But at least now we actually increase those further empathies, because they know that, look, it's not just about the money politics, but it's also because one vote does equal to, one person does equal to one vote, and the type of influences they pervade is equal at the end of the day. But I'm going to add more to the analysis than what Lucas added, right? This goes on to my first extension and why it's important, how this affects the issue, politics, the types of issues that come out within the parliament or democracies, right? But before I move on, yes, Smith.
Since you want to be comparative, sure, smaller parties can be affected by the market incentives that these larger parties can introduce, but at least under your side, these people have a direct control over the funding that you have, and at least can make the direct calculation that they don't need the money comparatively as much.
No, we don't care even if they do have a direct calculation, because I don't think our burden is to prove how are we going to survive this party, this particular policy, if a majority of the government has direct control over everything. Obviously, it's going to be an independent commission, and it's going to be as diverse as possible, right? But firstly, even if it's a direct control of that funding, it still doesn't negate the analysis I said, that at least it still comes at their own cost, so they will think twice about it. Let's go to my first issue. How this skews the issues that exist within democracies. Firstly, the reason why we limit political campaigns when it comes to financing is because we don't want the type of issues that come up within democracies to be indebted towards money that exists within those democracies, right? We think that when you don't ban private political donations, what happens is that politicians within those democracies will be indebted towards corporations as opposed to people on the ground, right? For example, how the NRA influences politicians in order to make them feel indebted towards them later on when they leave office by giving them jobs or giving them more and more money in the campaigns. These things ensure that whenever politicians make these votes and the issues that come out within democracies are based upon who puts in more money to their particular political party, as opposed to the type of demographic and popular support that happens within status quo, right? Within the particular country at the end of the day, right? Secondly, we feel that even if they say, but we put bans, we put limits on these political campaigns so we can see to your arguments. Firstly, we think that established parties still has an ability to reach that limit better than a disenfranchised minority party. And we feel that it's even bad, that's even worse under their side if they don't do anything about it. But secondly, this is when we think we win the comparative debate. Because I'm going to tell you what happens even if oppositions do win this particular idea, do enter into parties, and why that's still bad. Firstly, it's because the opposition parties that do enter into the congresses will still be indebted to the private corporations that fund them, as opposed to the people in general, right? Why is this so? Because even within minority demographics, there are still class systems in which African Americans exist in the upper class, African Americans exist in the lower class, right? We think when people in the upper class have more of a say within the democracy, the things in which they fight for will be detached from the minority at the end of the day, even on a comparative basis, right? For example, we think that the reason why we need as equal vote as possible for minority parties to enter and have more diversity with the congresses is because we want minority parties to be able to represent poorer communities who can't really enter into the particular spectrum via money and don't really have the efforts in order for them to establish and break that particular barrier of entry, because the established machinery that ensures they're automatically crowded out. But secondly, what are the exact barriers of entries that we're talking about here? Within things like cronyism, it ensures that even the private corporations that exist at school are not as varied as what Maeve wants to talk about, right? Fact is, a lot of private corporations still go for the most secure party at the end of the day. So knowing that corporations are not varied, and knowing that interest based upon money often just benefits the oligarchy, that's why our side much more caters to the diversity and spectrum. That's why we make democracy more inclusive, and they don't. Comparatively, we win this debate.
Thank you. Thank you.
As society says, money or cash makes the world go round. And in case of side of government, when they stop the money flow in any circumstance, whether in political elections or whether in the work or community, where money is what keeps everybody going, and what money can be seen as an incentive for these politicians to actually go for the lane, for the way of better, towards a society that are going to be elected by them. We believe that they must allow this money to flow. We believe that they need the money to incentivize them as a whole. 3 things I'm going to do in my speech. Firstly, I'm going to rebut side of opening government and closing government as a whole on how their arguments will be that media and people or these established communities or established parties will monopolize what we see as poor parties or not so established parties. Secondly, I'm going to introduce 2 new substantives or extensions that we want to say. The first one on how it maximizes the productivity or the best choice for political elections, and second one on how it increases the representation for people on the ground and also incentivizes the people or politicians even more as a whole. Firstly, let's take a look at opening government's arguments. Their arguments were simply that in monopolization or in a world where very good parties or very strong parties and established parties are going to be dominant over these parties that are not established as a whole. Yes, we completely concede to the fact that when you allow money flow to exist, then these people will be overpowered over these people who are not likely to perceive. Their second argument was that yes, monopolies will control over these parties as a whole. We concede to the fullest point that media will most likely go to Mark Zuckerberg rather than go to somebody on the ground who is going on the stage and say that elect me for you as presidential election. We believe that that is actually true. But what our side is allowing, that we allow these people to make a choice. We allow these poor people to have their consensus, or we allow the society to actually donate and give their choice to what these politicians are. To the very least, when these people are being deprived of their rights to be a leader, right? So no matter how rich these people are, we give them a choice. And we don't stop them from having to not have any support from the society as a whole. No, thank you. So let's take a look at Miss speech, right? What he stated as a model was that this NRA or an NGO will help support or reiterate the stand of the real political election as a whole, that they're going to give them jobs and whatnot. Okay, we believe that this will work, but what we think is a better model is that we allow society to choose. Let's take a look at what these politicians are going to be leading after they have ongoing these elections. They are going to be leading the society, ladies and gentlemen. We believe the society is what the incentive for these politicians to be better. That's why their campaigns exist, like free toll, free water, free KFC. This is what everybody needs. This is what the politicians put or they incentivize in people so that these people will be like, okay, that politician gives me free toll, I elect him. That's how it works. So incentivize the politician to be better and to not be hegemonic by the end of the day. But let's take a look. Society is what rules the people, and that is the principle of democracy. Democracy leads to the society making a choice for the government. And now you want to stop the money flow, which is the society that is going to be supported by the government. We believe that that is not suitable, that you are diluting the principle, the fundamental concept of democracy as a whole. It does not work that way. Let's go on to my first substantive. No, thank you. The first one, on how it maximizes the best choice for people on the ground or for political elections as a whole. First analysis is unjustified action of the state. Okay, let's paint this picture. There's a person A who is obviously rich, and there's person B who is middle class. When the government, like Miff said, all funds it equally, that means the person A will still be richer by the end of the day, and the person B will still be middle class by the end of the day. So we see that now, obviously the richer person will have these campaigns and be seen as the better one. So the outcome is that the richer people are seen the best, just because they have more money by the end of the day, just because they have better campaigns, or just because they have these pin badges that they give to society, they are seen to be elected by the end of the day. But that's not how it works, right? It dilutes the concept of democracy as a whole. So it leads to my second analysis, the flip point. Now the actual choice is actually perceived. Okay, when we see the imbalances happen, we need to balance it back as usual. But money flow, stopping the money flow to politicians is not the way how we do it. But we need society to control, because society is the one that controls democracy as a whole. Okay, so people can see and people support. By supporting, not only voting, but we allow it to financially support these parties or these politicians as a whole. And that is democracy, ladies and gentlemen. To the very least, when these unestablished parties don't get the job, that is the principle of democracy. To the very least, when these people or these established parties still get the job because money flow exists, that is democracy. To the very least, we don't stop these people from trying their best for society support to be better by the end of the day. So let's take a look on the outcome on this flip side. They have a chance to fight for. No matter how rich these people are, we give these unestablished parties or we give these middle class parties a chance to fight for, and that is equality, ladies and gentlemen, not the hegemonic side of the government. Before I move on, continue.
Your contention is that in opening in this debate is that you want to ensure that the disparity is removed. Can you tell us, with your maximization of choice and happiness, how do you ensure that the disparity is then removed?
Exactly. Let's take a look on your side. Your side was basically showing that the monopolization will actually stop these people, right? But still, your side, both sides have not provided how you are actually giving a chance or giving a way or actually a sense of hope for these people to fight in the political elections as a whole. Second argument, more representation for people on the ground. Okay, this is a new angle that we have to look at. It's how we make the politicians work, no matter the unestablished parties or established parties as a whole. Let's take a look at my characterization on analysis. On the first level, how do politicians work? Politicians work in the interest of voters, in the interest of society, in the interest of choices. Exactly that is why incentives exist, like free toll and anything that I stated earlier. That is why money is also seen as an incentive. So when the society actually gives money and the politicians like, okay, now he gives me money, that means he needs my support. So I'm going to make these campaigns and be better. That is the real mindset that we have to see. It's my second argument, the flip point. It gives consent, or it gives the actual conscience to politicians. Okay, let's take a look. When you stop money flow, that means you dilute the importance or consent of society. And now the government will be like, okay, I'm rich, I can do anything. The society does not care, the society does not support. I get elected, I can do anything. That is the most likeliness that we can see. You empower these politicians to be undemocratic because you now don't allow the society to support them. Let's take a look. When we allow money to pass, to the very least, we show concerns of society. The concerns of society to don't elect these people who are rich, to elect these people who are unestablished is seen. We allow society to make the right choice for them, even if by the end of the day, society does not get their choice made. That is democracy. So let's take a look. What have I shown? I've shown you that democracy not only exists to the point when you stop money flow, but to the point where you give them a choice, you give them a chance, you give them a way for them to go, not only by stopping money. Money makes the world go round. I'm exceedingly proud to propose.
Question I would like Ramlee to explain here.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I can hear everything you're saying.
Madam Chair, the whole illusion of freedom and the whole illusion that their voices are going to be heard is no more than just being an illusion status quo. They're trying to paint a picture that at the end of the day, society's voices will be heard.
everything is going to be fine because they're going to create an equal check and balance and an equal playing field to which these parties and to which all candidates can actually fight upon. We see that's no more than an illusion. Will these politicians actually focus on what society wants, or will these politicians focus on what the corporation wants in return? Is the question that has failed to be answered by all sides in today's debate, except for side closing government. We see there are few problems that existed in the whole of the opening side. Firstly, let's start off with OO. What were they trying to defend right now? They're trying to defend the fact that there is a check and balance in their system and they will have a cap. But now, the cap doesn't matter because the larger parties have a financial entrenchment than the smaller parties in status quo. Something they conveniently left out at their own expense, something they conveniently forgot because they are trying to paint the picture that everything is going to be fine. They fail to realize and they fail to characterize what these big parties are and what the smaller parties are, as well as the companies that are supplying the money towards these parties in status quo. Their side forgot to do that. Okay, now, minorities are getting the financial donation, and she was trying to say that the financial donation for the minorities will be gotten because their voices will be heard by the bigger corporations. We think there are many corporations right now in status quo, but that's not stopping the fact that how are these people actually going to voice out their opinions in the first place? They fail to prove to us onto how they're going to get to the level where they can voice out their opinions, where they can voice out the problems that they are facing in hopes that these companies will actually supply them the money. Because now, let's talk about marketing. How these people are actually going to market their problems. We feel to actually market your problems, you really have to have a stable high ground in order for you to actually say what the problem is in your party. She never explained to us how they're actually going to voice out their concerns. One, and secondly, there was a lack of clarity when it came to the minorities and also the majorities right now, because she failed to actually explain that the minority parties, there is no current platform for them to actually compete in these elections. That's why they lose. And secondly, she failed to tell us that the majorities right now already have a high platform in order for them to actually voice out their opinions, in order for them to actually get attraction, to actually get the money to actually invest into political campaigns. Now, let's talk about the private political donation, something that they also conveniently forgot to sit down. I'll take you later, Nick. Okay, firstly, they fail to realize that when you actually donate a certain form of money, you're donating it on the hopes that you get some form of return from that. When you actually donate money into something that you know that there's less a possibility that you're going to get money in the end, we say that there's no incentive to actually donate that form of money. Why is that so? Because now, let's prove something to you. Let's prove something to you. Once these corporations actually think that they can invest this money into the minority parties, is there any form of incentive in the next election? Because if they lose, what is then going to happen? If these minority parties actually lose the elections in the end, there is not going to be any form of donation, private political donations, because they lost the election. The corporations do not get any form of benefit towards that. But once you actually invest into a stabilized majority party, we say in the end of the day, it's a safe bet for these parties. It's a safe bet to ensure that you are going to get some form of benefits at the end of the day. And we feel that these corporations would rather choose to invest in the safer bet compared to the more riskier bet, which is the minority parties. Sure, Mif.
Why is it okay to give the taxpayers money who gave money in good faith equal amount of money to, for example, a radically xenophobic party that hardly gets any votes and wouldn't have gotten any money to begin with, but still give them an equal amount of money in that circumstance?
Firstly, there are no radical xenophobic parties in status quo. Secondly, even if they are, we feel that the state would not actually provide a certain form of money because these parties are actually contradicting what the law enforces. Don't try to twist our case, Sit down. Next, let's actually talk about what happens when the majority party gets money. We said the disparity still continues because something else that both sides of opposition failed to prove to us is to how these parties would not get that form of private political donation at the end of the day. How this corporation will be so incentivized not to donate to the majority party but only to the minority party. Something that they both failed to actually characterize to us. Now, let's talk about let's talk about okay. So now let's talk about Zim's speech and how it's more relevant compared to our OG. We see because Zim actually talked about the corporate interest, onto how corporate interest is such a big matter that's existing status quo right now. Because they are now all under the delusion that there's no form of corporate interest that's existing within society, onto how everything will be based onto what society wants and not what the corporation wants. Zim explicitly explained to you something that our OG also failed to do, onto how we prevent democracy and to also how there are barriers of entry that are going to exist further in status quo. Have a seat in myth. Now, the choice is an illusion, something that we have to concede to in today's debate. Because even if these politicians can do, even these politicians actually do what they need to get elected, we feel even if they don't get elected at the end of the day, what actually happens? They get actually employed into these private corporations, and we feel there's already no incentive for you to actually take part in there's no incentive for you to actually take part and actually focus on what society wants. Because right now, when there is no form of private political donation, what actually happens? Something that Zim explained to us. When there's no form of private political donation, what happens? We say then your sole career is based upon what society votes. That is when you stringently focus upon what society wants and not what the corporation wants. Because now, when you're getting your majority form of money from the corporations, we say, to hell with the society, to hell with what happens when society does not vote for me. Because you already have that safety net that you're going to be employed in the future. Another thing that Zim actually explained to us is how the established parties actually achieve a high ground compared to the smaller parties. How does that make sense on the outside, and how is that something that was completely unique to side CG? We feel significant because we actually proved to you onto how it's important in the stance that we want to create neutrality and we want to create an equal playing field to what all corporations, to what all political candidates should be doing in society, and not be basing their interests on what the corporations want. We want society's voices to be heard, and we don't want it to be clouded with what the corporations want back in return in the future. I've never been prouder to propose.
To end this debate and in front of
Mr. Speaker, in a world where hegemonic states rule the society, in a world where there is an asymmetry of power in society, we see that government side will exacerbate the situation even further. So let's look at the three issues that came up in this debate. Firstly, which creates a fairer playing ground for political campaigns, right? Secondly, who will increase more representation in society, and lastly, the argument on closing government, on how companies will establish the dominance in society. Then I'll go on to my best case and worst case scenarios for both sides. So let's go to the first issue on how which side creates a fairer playing ground for society, right? A fair playing ground for political campaigns. Okay, on government side, they argue that when there's equal distribution, it'll become fairer for everyone. But they are this argument is contingent on the fact that their problem is that oligopolies will control the markets, right? But two responses. Firstly, our policy makes a cap to how much people can donate. Secondly, our second response is now in politics, their representation becomes contingent upon how much these people have personally, right? And now this encourages a dictatorial government. Now it'll depend on how much they inherit. It'll depend on how much they have in the first place, and we see that this is very bad for politics. Yes.
Look, disparity exists on both sides, right? But how is it fair for you to expect the opposition party to gain power by some off chance that there are private entrepreneurs that can fund their rights?
We'll talk about that later in my speech. And the media argument, right, on how on how like on our side, like the media problem will still occur in society. We see that there's a higher probability for these hegemonic societies, for these society like which depend on their inheritance, like which depend on their wealth to like gain them all the support they need. We see that there's a high probability that this happens on your side because now the people cannot decide like what they want to fight for in like status quo. Second issue on how like it increases representation in society. Firstly, it increases representation in status quo. Firstly, like how like our side increases representation in society more compared to your side. So like on our side, we like increase the representation further compared to your side because like our side like makes individual donations, right? Our side makes like it gives choice for people to donate which person it gives these people a choice to donate for like which person to donate for it, and we see that this cannot happen under your side. And like now you like disempower the companies to like spread their influence in society. Like when you block out this private funding, it like disempowers people from like it disempowers this company from like spreading the influence spreading the influence in society. Yes.
So if your position is you're okay with maximizing choice and empowering happiness for individual voters, then why is your position is that you're okay with things like capping the political donations that you can give?
Like that response is because your problem is that oligopolies will control the markets, right? And we see that we concede that is very harmful. Secondly, on how like we increase representation in minority groups more compared to your side. Mr. Speaker, like politicians will still give a shit about these people because like a large fraction of these people in society are in the lower class, right? Like so many people are getting brick. Even the government say themselves like, oh, we give brick. We're proud for giving so many people brick. Like we see that this argument doesn't make sense for their side. Thirdly, on how like companies will establish their dominance in society. Like our side is okay with companies giving like money to these kind of people, right? Because like it encourages the buying of like people on the ground. It encourages these people to spend, and we see that this benefits the economy and people as a whole. So let's look at the best case scenario on both sides. So both sides wants to achieve a fair political ground for society. But which side is more free for like which side is more free in both policies? On government side, like the freedom, like they limit the freedom of the people. They don't allow the people to choose what they want to choose. Like, and we see that in status quo, like people in status quo want to maximize choice, right? What happens now? We see that now societal backlash will happen because like this individual cannot choose what they want to choose. On opposition side, we grant these people more freedom, right? We grant these people the choice for what they want to do. Yes.
In your world, the people who don't turn up to vote because they're sick of the system are Black voters and Latino voters. Please be the first speaker to tell us how your system of existing money donations gets these people out and therefore maximizes their choices.
I didn't understand that. So let's look at the worst case scenario on both sides. Okay. On government side, like I said before, like in status quo, people like love choice, right? People want to maximize choice all they can get. So the worst case scenario under that side is that like societal backlash will occur in society. Is that like these people won't donate in status quo. These people won't cooperate with like these kind of states, right? And secondly, the worst case scenario on that side is that like the dictatorial governments will rule based on the wealth that they have, right? Because like we see that a lot of money inherited, because we see that a lot of people inherited money from richer people. Like for example, Donald Trump. We don't want to see Donald Trump to go and become the president of the United States. The worst case scenario on our side is that like these, okay, fine, we concede to the fact that like these minority groups like won't have the representation better than its companies, but at least we keep these people happy. At least we let these people get the choice that they deserve, and this is what closing opposition would like to fight for.
Good morning.